Welcome to my channel, Edible Thoughts Makes. My name is Stephanie and I am coming to you from a chilly spring morning here in Minnesota where I live with my husband and our 2 young children. It is the beginning of April, year 2025. How are you doing? It has been, I think, about 3 weeks since I last did a video that went through all the projects that I was working on, all the things. I feel like it has been maybe 2 months since we last sat down and talked about all the projects, but I want to say I think it's only been about 3 weeks. A lot has happened in the last several weeks. We had a cold come through the house, we had spring break, we didn't travel, we stayed in town, but my parents had come into town, so we were hanging out with them, and of course there was just the busyness of school, but when you get sick kids thrown in the mix of that, everything just kind of goes all over the place. So I feel like it has been more than 3 weeks since we last sat down and talked about all the things, but here we are. I do have quite a few projects to share with you today. Some of them I actually started in February, some of them in March, some of them, I think a lot of them have not been shown here on the channel yet. There's quite a few new things to share with you. I feel like my baseline is to cast on everything. I'm always thinking about making color combinations and I don't know, the things like that are always kind of brewing in my head. And so sometimes those ideas just jump out and I just have to try it and see what happens. And so that's what I do. I run with the momentum because sometimes the timing is just not quite right, or I don't have the right combo of yarn and pattern or whatever it is. But when I do have all those pieces, like all the pieces line up, I just have to run with the momentum and give it a try. And so that is what I'm going to share with you today. Again, some of these projects have been on the needles for about 2 months and I just started them and then set them aside while I started other things, or I set them aside as projects for certain situations maybe. So like, let's say the beginning of it is a little more complicated and I had a chunk of time to really think about that and pull it together, but then I got to a section where it was just basically round and round stockinette. Well, now I can set it aside and use that for knitting that I'm doing while I am reading, because I can knit and read simultaneously for things that I don't have to count, things that I don't have to look at. Or maybe it is something that I can keep in the car for when I'm not driving or when I'm waiting for something, for my kids when they have after school activities, but it's not enough time to go home or go run any errand, so I just sit there. And yeah, so I have projects designated for things like that stay in my backpack or my purse or my car or next to my nightstand for reading. And then there are other ones that require a little more attention or a little more setup. Those I have to set aside for certain times that work for that. Long explanation long. That is how my projects are kind of divided up, and that's why I usually have multiple works in progress at a time. I do not work on only one thing at a time for that very reason, and I feel like because of that I am able to get a lot of making done because they are efficiently worked on, or maybe effectively worked on, or maybe a combination of both. And so yeah, so that's where we're at. Our weather has been all over the place. We had some unseasonably warm days that were maybe 70, 75. I don't know if it hit 75, but it was definitely 70 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll put the Celsius conversion here on the screen. I don't know it off the top of my head. And then it went down to like 10 degrees Fahrenheit with wind chill, and then it snowed. And so it's been all over the place. Hopefully I'll have some video or pictures here on the screen so you get an idea of the drastic changes that have happened in the last several weeks, but still enjoyable. And we expect snow in April here in Minnesota, so it is not a surprise to me. I'm not disappointed. You don't have to feel bad for me. I feel like some people will say, oh no, I'm so sorry. One, it's not like they can do anything about it. And two, they're assuming that I don't want it. I just accept it for what it is. It's okay. I am okay with snow in April. I expect it. If you are new here, the way I usually organize my videos is I have an intro, welcome section, and then I go into what I'm wearing, which is sometimes a segue into the finished project section, and then a works in progress section, and then eats and reads where I chat about things I'm baking, cooking, and books that I have been reading or am currently reading. And then sometimes there's a food for thought section at the end where I share something that's been on my mind, in my heart, sometimes related to making, sometimes not. Making is part of my 24/7, but it's also just very related to life stuff. And I do have a little food for thought section to share with you today. It sometimes comes with a quote unquote homework assignment, which is never mandatory. It is just maybe a thought experiment or something that if you wish to share here in the comments below, you are welcome to jump in on that conversation. But know that it is never required of you. I will not be here to tell you what to do, what to think, or how to knit, or any of the things. I'm here simply to share with you things that I have learned, my experiences, things that I have made, and maybe it will inspire you as well. I do include Ravelry project pages for all of my projects that are crocheted and knit. Sewing items are not on Ravelry. And I include closed captionings on all of my videos here. You click on the CC button. If I speak faster or slower than your preferences, YouTube also allows you to adjust the speed. Also in the description box below this video, sometimes you have to click on show more, or there's like a little arrow or tab or something, and it will bring down all the information. I will link to designers, makers, things like that, to their websites, and then you can find their social medias or whatever it is that you are looking for, and that should be there. And anything else? I don't think so. I think that's everything. If I remember, I'll add something in later, but that's a good note to make, that I do include notes here on the screen or pictures or things like that sometimes. And so if you are watching the video but not necessarily like watching it all the time, there might be information that you miss. I am human, so I mess up and I make mistakes. So I will correct myself on the screen if I can catch it in editing or in the description box below this video. But sometimes I miss things because, again, I'm human and things happen. Okay, with that, let's get into what I am wearing and my finished projects. We are now onto finished projects, and the first thing I want to talk about is what I am wearing. This is the Klee sweater. It is a pattern by Midori Hirose. It was published in summer 2022. And it had been living in my brain ever since then. Ever since I saw the sneak peeks of this pattern, I just knew it was something I had to make. It comes in so many sizes, from kids through several adult sizes. I want to say there are more than 10 sizes, maybe 16 different sizes. Something that I like about that is there are smaller increments also between the sizes, I believe, for like finished circumference. So I'm not having to decide between two sizes that might jump like 4 or 6 inches or something like that. I can hone in a little more on the fit that I want. At least that's what I'm remembering. It has been a little while. I cast this on November 2024 and I finished it end of March 2025. So that's 5 months. It didn't take everyday knitting for 5 months, but as I mentioned earlier, I work on lots of things at the same time. And so sometimes things stretch out over a long period of time, which is also why it's very difficult for me to answer a question of how long did it take you to knit that, because it just doesn't really work. Like, I don't time myself, and because I'm working on multiple things at the same time, some things may not get worked on for weeks, and then I come back to it. It doesn't, like, something like this could take me 5 months, but it could also take me 1 month, or it could take me a year, but it's not like active knitting time all the time, and I don't quantify that. So I understand when people ask, they just kind of want to know how long a project would take, but it just varies so much, and to me that doesn't matter, so I never time myself on how long it takes me to make something. Started this in November, ended it in March, and I love this so much. I'm going to stand up so you can see it a little bit better. I used a main color that's more of like a navy heathered teal. This is Pearl Soho's Good Wool, which is 100% Andean wool, and it is labeled as a sport weight. And I knit the colorwork section in multiple colors, and then my neckband, I used a hot pink. This neon pink is called Vice. It's by Less Traveled Yarn, who no longer dyes yarn, but I did that on the inside. I did not hold it double or anything. It's like a light fingering weight sock yarn. And then I did a folded over neckband. Hopefully it is in focus. That part I don't believe is in the pattern. I use an old Norwegian cast on for the majority of my projects, which is a very stretchy cast on. I have zero issues with this being too tight. I do have a tutorial on doing something very similar. It's the same technique, but for socks, and it isn't ribbed, it's just stockinette. But if you want to know how I do this, you can look at that video. I will have a link to it here in the description box and on the screen. I don't know why that sentence was so choppy. It was like the words just weren't coming, or I was going too fast in my brain and I couldn't get the words out. I really like this fold over collar. I think it provides a lot of structure and stability, and looking at a lot of the projects from other makers, it seemed like the neckline varied a lot. Some were really floppy, some were more structured, and some were wider, and there is variance in however way you want to do it, right? And so I knew this is the way I wanted to do it because I wanted a little more structure, and if for whatever reason it got too wide, because I'm creating basically a channel, I can thread elastic inside and just hide it if I really needed to, but I'm not anticipating needing to do that. This yarn is a non-superwash wool, so it's not going to stretch out. It's going to hold its shape over time, and I just find this really comfortable. I'm really happy with how it turned out. So the colors I used a ton of different colors. How am I gonna do this? Maybe if I can pull up a picture of it, I can go through all the colors. We'll see. Let's see. It's harder to do and point to it also if I am not actually looking at myself. The top row is Pale Patina, which is the light blue, and that is paired with Teal Twilight, which is the slightly darker one. Oh, and the main color is Teal Abyss, which is a very dark, deep, heathered teal navy color. The second band, we have Loganberry, fresh Loganberry, which is that like jammy berry color, and that's paired with Coastline Gray, which is more of a gray purple color. And then we have here Dark Spruce, which is a very dark green, and that is paired with Olive Oil, which is a heathered springier green. The next row we have Guava Earth, which is kind of maybe an orangey pink color. And I have that paired with, what is that paired with? Wild Mustard, which is a heathered gold. And then the next row, I have Walking Stick, which is like a brown gray color, and that's paired with Wintergrass. I think both of those are undyed colorways, and Wintergrass is kind of a beigey color. Beigey gray, maybe, a cool beige color. And the next row, we have Barn Door, which is a red-orange color, and that's paired with Pink Salt, which is a very light peachy pink color. And then the next row, we have Desert Blue, which is a more saturated blue. Well, not saturated. It's more saturated than Pale Patina. And I used Pale Patina earlier as well, but it looks a little different because it's paired with a different color. So these two are low contrast, whereas on the top for that first row, it's high contrast. And then I have these two purples here. Wild Heath, I believe, is the lighter one, and Wild Violet is the darker one, but I don't remember exactly. I think that's what it is. And then we have another repeating color down here. This is Teal Twilight again, which is the heathered teal color, tealy blue color, and that's paired with Teal Abyss, which is the main color, so low contrast there. You can use another color instead of the main color for that bottom row, but I wanted it to blend in a little bit more instead of have a harsh line. So I purposely went with a low contrast and had it go with my main color instead of another color. Whew, that was a lot of colors, but that is all of them. And I had so much fun putting this together. There are no long floats to catch. After you do this round section, you have some raglan increases to shape this underarm area. I find that fit really comfortable for round yoke sweaters because then you don't end up with a lot of extra fabric in this underarm section. I just feel like the shaping of the sweater fits better. There is short row shaping in the back of the neck, which is visible by this wedge before the colorwork section starts. I feel like if I wanted to have even more of a difference, I could have done another round of short rows in the back section, but as it stands, the front and the back lay straight and I don't have any lift in the front or the back. So I think it worked out just fine. But if I wanted to have a slightly high-low hem, I could always add more short rows in the back before the ribbing starts. That would just be a style preference. Otherwise, it fits just fine. It's at about high hip, just past my hips on me. I'm wearing it with high-waisted pants, and I believe I did change the amount of ribbing from the pattern. The pattern ribbing I think might be a little... I did like 2.5 inches and the pattern ribbing might be 4 inches, something like that. Don't take my word for it. I also did an Italian sewn bind off on all of my ribbing. That way it matched my folded neckband without having double layers. Maybe show you here on the hem. It might not show up. Sometimes I get too close and you can't see anything, but it's also really dark and it's dark outside today, so it's hard to show. But hopefully you could see it a little bit. And yeah, this I made the adult XS size, which is a finished circumference of 38 inches. I think mine ended up being 37 inches. I did not like stretch it out in the blocking process. I just laid it out flat. And the recommended ease is 6.25 to 10 inches of ease. This finished gives me 5 inches of ease, 6 inches if I had stretched to 38 inches, but I didn't. And it fits just fine. So I do have a little bit of ease at my hips. I have more ease on full bust chest circumference. And I did change my needle size a little bit. I think the rib calls for a US 2. I used a US 3, which is a 3.25 millimeter. And then I used the same needle, which is a US 5 for the color work and the main stockinette portion, the main fabric, because my color work gauge is usually pretty loose. It tends to err on the looser side because I overcompensate. I'm so, I don't know, annoyed, afraid, don't want, I can't think of the word, of tight floats and puckering that I end up overcompensating. I knit my 2-stranded color work with both hands, and I will also stretch out my stitches on my right needle to keep them nice and loose if there's any floats. And so my tension ends up sometimes too loose, and if it's too loose, then I will drop the yarn in my left hand and then just throw and pick up on my right hand all the time and just knit the color work with my right hand. I'm not sure if that makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure I did the best job of explaining that, but if you knit color work, maybe you understand what I'm saying. So I have a little more control of my tension if I don't knit it with 2 hands, because that sometimes just ends up being way too loose. But I think it turned out just fine. I can't really show you the inside without taking my sweater off, but maybe I can show you like this. I'll just flip it inside out a little bit, but I feel like my floats turned out just fine. There is 0 puckering. It also helps if you use a yarn that's slightly stickier. I feel like everything kind of smooths out really nicely into a cohesive fabric. I don't feel like anything is too gapey. The increases are very cleverly done within the color work, so you don't really notice any, I don't know how you would say it, like where the increases are. I feel like sometimes you can tell where the increases are in the shaping of a color work yoke, but I don't feel like it's very visible here, which looks really cool. And yeah, I'm trying to think if I have anything else to say. Yardages for all of my different colors took anywhere from like 3 to 5 grams. And my neckband, the hot pink used 9 grams. And then the rest for the heathered deep teal navy color, I used 219 grams. And this yarn comes in This good wool yarn comes in 383 yards for 100 grams. It is one of my favorites. It is at a really great price point from Pearl Soho, who often runs 25% off sales. And so I just slowly collected all these colors over time and bought a few sweater quantities so I could jump in on a project when I needed it. And I'm just so happy with this yarn. Again, it's 100% Andean Highland wool. It's so good for color work. I don't find that it pills super easily or that it's super itchy. To each their own. A lot of times people will ask me if a certain yarn is itchy or not, but that's so personal that I have a really hard time answering that. I personally don't find it itchy, and I've made multiple garments with it. I also don't find it super pill prone, because I feel like compared to some other garments or items that I have made in other yarns that pill super easily, that this is not one that pills super easily. Just wears really well. I find it lightweight, it's warm, but not too warm, and because it's not heavy, it's something that I can easily throw on whenever I just want a little bit of a warm layer. And I will often wear my sweaters with like a t-shirt underneath, and I find it super comfortable. I find zero itch with this. Now, if I got too hot, anything wool will be itchy on me, so it's fine. This is really comfortable for me. I did share some pictures on Instagram and my Ravelry project page of me wearing this sweater with dresses that I have sewn in the past. They look like skirts, but they're actually full dresses. And I have the sweater on top of it, so you can't see what the top part looks like. And I also have it worn with jeans, so you can see how it looks with jeans, but it turned out wonderful. It just goes with so many different things, and the different colors go with so many different things, and I am just in love with this sweater. All right, on to the next finished project. We are going to talk about a sweater I knit for my daughter, and this is the Love Note sweater by Tin Can Knits. This is so fun to knit. I have made maybe 4 different versions of this pattern. It is a very size inclusive pattern. This one I knit in the 8 to 10-year-old size. And that finished circumference is a 34.5-inch chest circumference, which I think this is close to. I don't actually remember measuring it again, but that gives my daughter plenty of ease. The recommendation is 4 to 12 inches of positive ease. And I decided I wanted to knit it full length. I can't remember if I knit this past full length. I think this is about full length. I did do the high-low hem, and the sleeves end up being more bracelet length. I was having to be very careful with the amount of yarn because when I initially purchased this yarn, this is Pearl Soho's Daily Wool. It's a 100% superwash wool, but not merino, but I think it is as soft as merino, but maybe more durable. She wore this almost every day for a week straight, and there is some slight pilling on it, but really not too bad. I have had other garments that I have made her that have pilled way more, which are 100% superwash merino. So this yarn is 164 yards for 100 grams. So it's kind of closer to like Aran weight, but it's labeled as a worsted weight. It's a very dense and round yarn, which gives great stitch definition for this lace section. And I knit mine using US 6 or 4mm for all the ribbing. Oh, nope. I used US 6 or 4mm for the neck ribbing, but for the cuffs and the hem, I used a US 7, and for the main fabric, I used a US 9. And for whatever reason, I can't remember the millimeter needles for that, so hopefully that will be on the screen. Sorry about that. I usually have that part figured out, but my brain doesn't seem to be connecting all the dots right now, and so we're just going with it, okay? We're just going with it. I knew that the cropped estimate was going to take about 450 yards. Full length was going to take about 500 yards, and I had about 500 yards to start with. So I also knew I was going to make the sleeves bracelet length instead of the 3/4 length in the pattern. So I just had to be very careful about my yarn management, and I had less than 2 grams left. If I have a picture of that, I will show it here on the screen so you know what that looks like. It was not very much left, and so I'm very happy with how this turned out. This colorway is Forget Me Not Blue. I originally purchased it for a different sweater I was going to knit her, and I had started that and it just did not work out. The density of the fabric was too dense, and it just didn't fit right at all. Like, I picked the wrong size. The striping looked really cool. The colors looked cool together because I had this paired with other colors, which is why I only had a limited amount to go with for this. But anyway, this yarn I feel like works out much better knit at a looser gauge, so it's not super, super dense. And I guess for the other one, I probably could have just picked a different needle size. Anyway, it was a disaster. I ripped that apart and I knit this beautiful love note. This worked out very, very nicely. And I did do the provisional cast on for the neckband, which is good because I had to knit this neckband like 3 or 4 times to get it to fit properly. And I did an Italian sewn bind off, so it's a rounded edge. I did that on all the edgings, which is not what the pattern calls for. I believe the pattern just calls for a bind off in pattern, maybe. But I've been really liking this Italian sewn bind off lately. It is not hard to do. It is a very stretchy bind off, and I think it looks nicely finished. I don't particularly care for doing a tubular bind off because that one you take extra steps in the beginning to do these setup rounds, which I think is essentially creating like a double knit couple of rounds before you do the tubular bind off. I don't know for sure. Again, I don't do the tubular bind off enough to be able to tell you much about it, so I probably shouldn't be talking about it. But what I do is, I believe this is called an Italian sewn bind off. The tutorial I've always followed is the one by Stephen West, except he calls it a tubular bind off, but in the comments, a lot of people have said it's actually an Italian sewn bind off. I don't know. I'll link to it in the description box below this video. That's just what I use, and I love how it turned out. I ended up using, well, I know I had less than 2 grams left. I used a total of 309 grams, which is 503.5 yards. She absolutely loves it. Like I said, she lived in it for a week. She wore t-shirts under it, or tank tops under it. She loved that it kept her warm, but there was still some airflow, which makes it the perfect spring sweater. And it just was so cute on her. I will just have to tell you, you'll just have to believe me that she just loves it so much. The next finished project I'm going to share with you is a pair of socks. This one I did share it as a work in progress last time we talked. This is the 2025 March Colorwork Cuff Club by Summer Lee Designs, as well as the 2025 March Sock Squad Sock Set by the Farmer's Daughter Fibers. Both are indigenous creatives, and I just love that I was able to combine the two together. I did have to add another color because this pattern required 3 colors, and the red-orange color that I used here is called Let's Picnic, and that's by Colleen of Little Lion Head Knits. I just love how this bright turquoise pops in here, and the red-orange color mimics some of the variegation in the rest of the sock. It's like a golden sand color with this red-orangey variegation, and I feel like it really distributed itself nicely, and I love how it turned out. I believe this is the Highwood sock base, which is an 80/20 superwash merino nylon. It comes in 400 yards for 100 grams. I knit the adult small, and I use US 1 2.25 millimeter needles for everything but the heel turn. I talked about this in, I think, 2 previous episodes already, so you can look at that if you're interested. But the heel turn, just this little triangle on the bottom, I used a US 0 or 2 millimeter needle just to make that fabric denser just in that little spot, because that's where I tend to blow out my socks. So it's an experiment that I'm doing, and only time will tell if that works out for me. I used 47 grams or 48 grams of the main color and about 2.5 grams of this turquoise color and 1 gram of the red-orange color. I'll show you the inside of my sock. Here are the floats. There are floats to catch in this pattern, which is part of the reason why I also use this red-orange color, because if any of the floats poke through from where I caught it, it will just blend in with the variegation of the main color. I really like how these socks turned out. I think they are so fun and springy, and they will look great with my tennis shoes with that top part just sticking out. We are on to the works in progress section. Now I have a lot of works in progress, and for the sake of time, I probably won't go through all of them because we'll be here for a while. Or maybe I'll go through all of them, but not go through all of the details because eventually those details will be repeated again later. I don't know. We'll see how far I get and how my energy keeps up with me and how much time I have. And yeah, so let's just jump right in. The first one I'm going to share with you is the Hibernate pullover by Amy Sure Makes. Now, I have made 2 of these already. I tested this pattern for Amy last year, and last fall I purchased yarn from Amy's online shop to make a 3rd one, but I just hadn't gotten around to it yet because of course I was making other things, and sometimes I just have to wait until the timing is just right. I cannot force it. It just doesn't work for me to force it. So I didn't. But when I was ready, I did start, and I just love how this turned out, and I'm looking forward to wearing it this spring. Sorry, I am trying to find a tag for the yarn, but I believe I only kept 1 of them, and the rest I might have recycled. And the one that I have is taped to my notebook, which has notes on it. It is my first time using this yarn. It is very round, very bouncy. It's 90% wool, non-superwash wool, and 10% silk. I'm not sure I would be able to tell that there was silk in it if you didn't tell me, but it's delightful nonetheless. It comes in these little donuts that are supposed to be 50 grams. But what I'm going to say is that none of mine came as 50 grams. They were like 48 or 49 grams, which is normal. I think it's within some normal range that they might show up in. However, I did purchase my yarn quantity to be exactly what I needed. And because I am short a little bit on each one, it adds up. And so again, I am playing careful, calculated yarn management to use up every single gram of this yarn, and it'll be just fine. I'm not particularly worried. I just know that because it was a little bit short on each one, that I just have to be extra careful. So here is the yarn. I'm going to try to show you the bounciness of it. There's a lot of elasticity. It is hard to show, I think, on screen. Hopefully it is focusing. But yes, it's very bouncy, very round, and a delight to work with. I really like how the fabric is knitting up, and I'm going to show you what the sweater looks like. Here we are. So right now it looks like a super crop top because I have knit 2 full-length sleeves, and I'm working on the body now. So basically I knit this top section. It is a top-down V-neck. So I knit the top section using the awesome raglan tracker that Amy provides in the pattern, which is so nice because initially I was just making all those trackers myself with any pattern because I want to make sure that I have the right stitch count as I go, because if I find out at the end that I'm missing something, I can't fix it as easily, or I don't know where I'm missing that stitch or that increase, and so I go line by line. And now I don't have to make that tracker and hope that it's right because it's provided, and it makes the process so much more enjoyable. So I did that, and then I knit my neckband. I also wet blocked this top section already just to double check fabric and fit. And then once I ran out of my yarn past the separation for the sleeves and the body, I went ahead and knit both sleeves. I knit them full length. I tend to have longer arms compared to the size I would make for my chest circumference. And I also noticed that in ready-to-wear garments that the sleeve length tends to be a little bit on the short side. And so I love being able to make my own garments and make my sleeve lengths the way I want them to be. I tend to like my sleeve lengths to be pretty long, otherwise I'm always pulling at them, and then if I'm pulling at them, then my neck area is getting pulled, but I just knit them a few inches longer and it's just fine. This pattern actually has the sleeves longer anyway, and so I think I can't remember if I knit it even slightly longer in this one. I don't remember. Anyway, that was a while ago. And so yes, now I'm on the body section. I'm just knitting around and around and around. The ribbing uses a US 3 or 3.25 millimeter, and the rest of the fabric uses US 6, which is a 4 millimeter. The gauge is 21 stitches by 28 rounds, and the pattern is written for DK weight yarn or fingering plus lace weight. And this yarn comes in 133 meters for 50 grams. I don't remember what that yardage is, but I'm hitting gauge. I love the fabric. I can't wait to wear this. Because this is in a section that doesn't need counting or really paying attention, this is one that I can do while I am reading, but it is also one that I can probably throw in the car to just pick up and knit on whenever. I would love to have this done by the end of April. Actually, I would really love to have it done in the next 2 weeks, which I think is possible. I only have these 2 balls of yarn left, which is less than 100 grams, and so I will just knit them to the end, and then I will have a beautiful new sweater to wear. Another reason I really want to finish that is because Amy is starting a make-along on April 4th. The rules or guidelines or whatever you call it for that are all on Amy's social medias and newsletter, so check out that if you are interested. I will have Amy's website linked in the description box below this video. I plan on casting on their latest pattern, which is the Relax Tee. I already have 2 sets of yarn set aside for 2 different versions of the Relax Tee, and I'm so excited for that. So I'll flash a picture of that here just so you can get a little idea of what that looks like in case you want to grab that pattern for yourself. But I'm excited to cast that on, but before I do that, I really want to finish this Hibernate pullover so that I can cast on another project. The next project I'm going to share with you today is one by a designer that I have yet to knit a pattern from until this one, and that is the Lumme tee. Is it called Lumme or Lume? I should have looked that up.
Lumme. Lumme. Lumme.
Sari Nordland lives in Finland and has lots of different patterns, but this is the first pattern that I am knitting by Sari. She does a lot of cabled patterns and lace patterns, and I'm not really someone that tends to love knitting cables or lace. I don't mind looking at people's projects that have cables and lace, but I don't enjoy that knitting process. But colorwork I do love, and this tee is written for colorwork. It is a DK weight. I think her sample uses Knitting for Olive silk, maybe? Am I making that up? I don't remember. I think her pattern uses silk held double, but the silk she uses is very, very thin. So she holds this light fingering weight double to achieve DK weight at a gauge of 20 stitches by 26 rounds. And she uses a US 4, which is a 3.5 millimeter needle, and a US 6, which is a 4 millimeter needle. Now I deviated a little from that. Let me see if I can find my info. I had an idea and I just had to run with it. I'm so excited. So I picked the second size, which is 36.25 inches, should give me about 4 inches of ease. The recommended ease is 0 to 3 inches. So I used a US 4 for the hem and the neckband, but for the sleeve cuffs, which I did differently from the pattern, she has this fold over neckband, cuffs, and hem, but I did ribbing. So I changed that up a little bit, and I'm going to show you where I'm at. Ready? Here we are. Is this not spring in a sweater? This is spring knit into a sweater. I love this. I love this burst of color. I love how spring is all the shades of green. Now we're not there yet. We're not at green yet. We're still in very much of a neutral environment right now. Grays, browns, whites. But spring will come. Spring is coming, and it will be a burst of thousands of shades of green. So this is my interpretation of this tee and my interpretation of spring. The pattern has 2 colors for it, or 2 colors. It's designed for 2 colors, but I decided to do it in 5 colors. And my main yarn here is Lavender Loon, and the colorway is Concho. I'm not sure this label is showing up. It's so dark. It's a 70% non-superwash merino, 5% yak, 5% silk. No, that does not add to 100%. 70% non-superwash merino, 15% yak, 15% silk. I purchased this yarn directly from Sam last year or the year before. I think it was last year at one of our yarn festivals here. Sam is a local dyer to me, and this comes in 330 yards for 115 grams. It's a DK weight yarn, and I have 2 of them, and this is the beautiful sweater that I am knitting. Now the contrast colors are all Pearl Soho Quartz held double, and that yarn is, do I have a tag for it? Nope, that is not the right tag. That is left over from something else. I don't think I have a tag for it. So hopefully I'll put the info here on the screen. It's a Surrey alpaca merino, also non-superwash yarn, and it's a fingering weight yarn, and I'm holding that double here. And the colors here are golden green, which is the chartreusey color. And then we have hydrangea blossom, which is this periwinkle blue color. And then peony pink, which is this very pale peachy pink. And then the bright, bright coral color is pink guava. So this is my interpretation. Oh, it's so good. I love it. Now the ribbing, I did knit 1, purl 1 rib. I did 5 rounds and then a sewn bind off. And then for the sleeves, I did do the decreases as written. And then for my cuff, I switched to a US 3. I did do a US 4 initially, but I didn't like how it was sitting, so I went down to a US 3. I did the same amount of ribbing as I did for the neckband. And it should hit right at my elbow, or right above my elbow. That's the plan anyway. So we'll see how it turns out. I think when I wet block it, I'm gonna try to block out the sleeves slightly wider, but keep the cuff a little pressed in, so it might do like a slight kind of puff action, but kind of cinch in. I did not do a bunch of extra decreases before the ribbing. And so that's what I'm planning on doing when I wet block it. And then, yeah, I am almost done with this. I have, let's see, I'm gonna show you how much yarn I have left. I'm guessing this is about 40 grams or so. And so I might add another bit of short row shaping in the back just for high-low hem. I'm not sure yet. The nice part about this short row shaping is it is not done right below the neckline, so you don't have like a break between the neck and the start of the color work section. It's done after. And so there's already shaping involved, which is nice because then you don't have your neckline like riding up in the front. It's more shaped to the way a body is shaped. But I might do a little bit more, like add in another wedge in the back before the hem, just to do a slight high-low hem. I'm not sure. We'll see. But I'm almost to the point where I have to decide about doing that. So I just need to think about it, and I need to do a little bit of math to figure out how much yarn I need to reserve for that part and how much yarn I need to reserve for the hem, so that I can make sure I don't run out, because that's all the yarn I've got left. The thing is, if I do run out, I would be okay with subbing in the chartreuse green color for like a little bit on the hem. If I'm like 2-3 rounds short, I could just add that on the bottom and I would be okay with that. So I do have a backup plan in case I run out, but if I don't run out, that'd be great too. So that is something I'm super excited about. I can definitely finish that in the next couple of weeks. So that will be a great spring sweater to add to my collection. All right, I think I'm going to go through 2 more works in progress. I think that's how much time I have left for this. This one I'm not going to touch a lot on, but it is, again, another designer I've never knit from. This is Haley of Ozetta, and I am knitting the Port jacket. I'll flash a picture of it here on the screen. YeJi of Handmade Co. has knit 2 of these, I believe 2, right? And they are just both so lovely. Something that I've been eyeing for a little bit, but I wasn't sure exactly how I wanted mine to be, and so again, I had to think about it for a little bit. Let me pull up some more information about this pattern. This was released September 2024, and it is more of like, well, it's got this high neck, which looks really cool, and it has a drop shoulder, but has these thoughtfully designed little elements to it that are really neat. It is made top down, and it's supposed to have a more boxy silhouette with very long sleeves, and it comes in sizes, let's see, finished circumference of 42 inches up to 62 inches, and the gauge is 17 stitches by 26 rows. And it's meant to be knit on a US 8, which is a 5mm needle for the main fabric. Now I picked the smallest size, and I'm using a new to me yarn that is a newer base by Purl Soho. This I did receive yarn support for. And this base, okay, here are my initial thoughts on it. If you've used some of their other bases, or the ones I'm about to mention, then maybe you'll know what I'm talking about. I feel like this is a cross between the linen quill worsted that they used to have that got discontinued. It was a very round yarn. It is the same as their fiber content wise, the same as their fingering weight linen quill, but it was worsted weight, and a heavy worsted weight. It was round, it was bouncy, it was delightful, and it was discontinued. And I feel like it's a cross between that and good wool, which I was telling you about earlier. It's what this Paul Klee sweater is made out of. So this is called Till. It's 100% Andean wool, and it comes in 136 yards for 100 grams. So I feel like it's leaning like chunky Aran weight. This is what it looks like caked up. It does come in hank form. It is very round and also has a lot of nice bounce to it. Hopefully this is going to focus okay for you. I feel like it is airy, not super dense, and not splitty. So it's got those great round qualities of the linen quill worsted, but it has the fiber content and the loftiness of the good wool. So I am knitting this for the first time. I did swatch, and I am knitting the port jacket. So it is a little tricky to show this because it doesn't have the finishings on it, but I did knit my sleeves to almost finished length. I have the decreases marked by these light bulb stitch markers here to keep track, and I just knit until that particular yarn ball ran out, and I have it on silicone cords because I want to knit the rest of it first before I finish the sleeves to see if I need to make an adjustment to the sleeve length. And I can't really tell that until my body section is finished and the button band is finished and the collar or neckline section is finished. So I really can't tell how long I want the sleeves to be until I finish everything else. So basically I wanted to knit my 2 sleeves for as long as possible. Like for as long as the yarn went, and then go back to the body. So it is knit flat for the body section and knit in the round for the sleeve section. And this colorway is Winter Grass. It's a light gray beigey color. And this is where I'm at. So here's a nice rib detail on the drop shoulder where it meets the sleeve. And then the back section has the pickups here, which add a little stability to this other white heavier weight sweater. And I'm not sure if I have anything else to mention on this. I was hoping that this one would be done in April because it's kind of a perfect transition piece to be able to just throw on, and it is a little heavier weight. But I'm not sure if this one will be finished because I have other things I want to finish too, and that's okay. I purposely knit it in a more neutral color so that it could be worn year-round versus like a darker color that I feel like gears more towards fall, or a pastel-y color that gears more towards spring. I just wanted something that was very neutral and easy to throw on with anything because the things I wear range in all sorts of color palettes, and I feel like this will go really well with everything and maybe even be a good travel. No, maybe not. It's way too bulky, and we tend to pack lighter when we travel, so unless it's a road trip, if I'm flying, I don't think this is coming with. This is going to take up way too much space. By the time it's done, it would probably take up half the size of a carry-on suitcase. Anyway, I'm very delighted with this so far. I love the feel and hand as I am knitting it. Oh, you know what? This is a good maybe this can show how the plies are nice and lofty in the cake in the center. You can see it's not necessarily like coming apart because I don't have any issues with it splitting, but you can tell that it's more loosely plied. It's definitely not as dense. And yeah, I'm enjoying this project and I will finish it whenever I finish it. The last work in progress we're going to talk about today is an idea that was just stuck in my head, and I had been wanting to cast on another Lento. I have made, I think, just one so far. It is one of those top-down raglan sweaters that knits at a looser gauge, and I had just been itching to make another one, and so I did. I had an idea for what I wanted to make, and I had the yarn on hand. Some of the yarn I think is from 2019, but I didn't have a ton of it, and so I really needed to make something that uses less yarn at a looser gauge to be able to make my yardage go the farthest it can go. And so this is the Lento, and I am using US 6 or 4mm needles for the ribbing and US 10 or 6mm needles for the rest of it. Are you ready to see this? Here we are. Oh, this is just the perfect sweater to show off on this very dark, overcast day. There is a folded neckband in the pattern, but I made mine thicker, and of course I added a pop of color. So the highlighter yellow is Knit Picks Stroll. It's a fingering weight yarn, 75-25 superwash merino nylon. I don't believe they have this neon color anymore, so this is from a long time ago, but I'm holding that double. So I knit to more than halfway of where I wanted it to be, cut that yarn, and then joined the marled gray and mohair held together. This yarn, the silvery gray mohair, is by Tolematan, who is a French dyer. I don't have a colorway on this, but I won it in a giveaway from the dyer in, I think, November 2019. So this is the mohair, and I just have the 50 grams of it. So I'm trying to make it go as far as it can go. I'm going to knit the sweater a little more cropped, and we'll see. We'll see how far I get. I do have a cream colored mohair that I'm going to add on as an accent if I run out of this one, and I will be perfectly fine with that. The marled yarn I am using is one that I usually use for socks. This is Patton's Croy sock yarn in gray marl. This is a heavy fingering weight yarn. I would say it's a little closer to sport weight. It comes in 166 yards for 50 grams. And I love this marled color, but I felt like it was going to be a little much in a sweater. Like I didn't want to look like that staticky screen on a TV where it's kind of hard to look at. And then I also felt like it looked like those magic illusion graphics. Do you remember those? I don't remember when they were popular, like 90s maybe. And you would stare at it and then this like image would kind of 3D pop out of this staticky looking thing. If you know, you know. So to soften it, I was like, okay, I'm gonna add this mohair. And because this is a bigger gauge but smaller number pattern, I didn't want it to be too gapey. And so I felt like the two together should really work, and it does. I'm knitting the first size, which should give me about 6 inches of positive ease. It's a little bit bunched up here, and I know it's going to grow and relax a little bit with blocking, but I have gone past the sleeves, the sleeve body separation section, which I love that milestone because all of a sudden you have a lot less stitches, and I'm just knitting in the round. So I love how this looks. I initially called it newspaper and highlighter because I name a lot of my projects, but then I wanted to name it overcast with a chance of sunshine, but now I'm back to newspaper and highlighter because that was my original kind of inspiration for it. And I feel like a lot of people don't read newspapers anymore because by the time you get the newspaper, it's like old news at the rate that news goes out these days. And I do remember in school having to have current events, like current events, not presentation, but like you would have current events days, right? Where you have to bring in a newspaper clipping and you would be highlighting the points that you want to talk about. And that's what it made me think of. So we're back to newspaper and highlighter. I love how this looks. I'm so excited to have this as a piece to just throw on with jeans or pink corduroy pants, linen pants, whatever I feel like it. but I just love it. I'm going to knit it, I think, high hip length sleeves. I'm not entirely sure yet. I might do no decreases and do it 3/4 length sleeve, or I might do it full length. We're just going to have to see how far my mohair goes and where I want to add in the cream white colored mohair, but I think that's gonna look really cool because the marl in this yarn is gray with like a lighter gray cream color. So I think the two are going to go really, really well together. And I'm okay with a little bit of color blocking. I feel like because I did the neckband with a bright pop, that the color blocking, because of the change in mohair, will really go together with it. So it won't look, I guess what I'm trying to say is it will still look intentional, which it is because I'm intentionally putting it in. But anyway, okay, that's a lot of talking. We're gonna take a break. Switched out the laundry, had a little snack, new hot cup of tea. This is peppermint. And we are going to continue with this video, and we are on the eats and reads section. I didn't really jot down all the things that I wanted to share as far as like baking, cooking, all of that stuff goes. So maybe I'll just have some pictures going here on the side for the last like 30 seconds or so. And yeah, so I mean, I've baked and cooked a lot. I bake and cook every day. I don't think there's anything that's really sticking out in particular. To you about, and I will flash their cover on the screen here as I talk about them. If there is a certain book you don't want to hear anything about, you could always scroll forward, and when that book cover changes to the next book, you can stop again or something, or you could just skip this whole section entirely if you're not interested in the books that I read. But yes, I have 3 to talk about, and let me get my notes here. The first one is Emily's Compendium of Lost Tales. This is the 3rd book in a trilogy by Heather Fawcett. This latest book, the 3rd one, was published February 2025, 368 pages. We've got this curmudgeonly professor, Emily, who is in her early 30s, which I actually really appreciate. That's still younger than me, but a lot of fantasy books, I feel like the main character is either like in their teens or 20s, and sometimes if they're in their 20s, they're considered old, but that's really not old. And so I appreciate when a main character in a fantasy series is a little bit on the older side. I feel like maybe it's because in fantasy series, the characters don't survive very long because they tend to be in very violent worlds. Maybe that's why they're not as old. And then if they are old, they're like several centuries old because they're in this fairy realm where they may or may not be immortal, but they still live a really long time. Anyway, I digress. So we've got this main character, Emily, who's a professor, and we've got Wendell, who is hilarious and of the fairy kingdom, of the fairy world. And I don't want to give away anything. I love their relationship. I will say there was less banter in this third book than there were in the first two, which I just absolutely loved. And so I did miss some of that. I do feel like Wendell's character kind of went up a notch, and then everybody else felt more bland, which is kind of sad to say. I love his character, and I love the growth and development that came from his character compared to book one, but I felt like Emily fell a little flat. I don't know. And it seemed like a lot of the perspective of the third book was from her perspective, but I felt like she could have taken it one step farther. I don't know. This is just what's in my head right now. Oh, I forgot to tell you. So this is adult fantasy, romance, adventure, fairies, cozy. I think it goes under like cozy fantasy type of subgenre, but I did still really enjoy it. I am a little bit sad that the trilogy is over. I felt like the other two were a little more heavily plot driven, or maybe faster paced in their plot, where I feel like this one, I don't know, it just didn't, I was really looking forward to it, and I still really enjoyed it. I'm still really glad I read it. It just wasn't as punchy maybe as I was hoping for, for like a finale of a book. I don't know. Still loved it, and I would recommend it if this is something that you're into. Again, that's Emily's Compendium of Lost Tales. I really don't want to say too much about this one because it just released, and there are people that probably want to make their own observations. No, that's not the word. I can't think of the word. This is Oathbound. It is the third book in the Legend-Born cycle by Tracy Deonn. It is so good. So good. And I thought it was going to be a trilogy, but actually there's going to be a fourth book, and I do not know when the fourth book is going to be released yet. This is not really like a spoiler or anything. I'm just letting you know in case you want to know. This book was published March 2025. It is 656 pages. It is classified as young adult fantasy, romance, urban, contemporary fantasy. Your main characters are like 17, 18 years old or something like that. And, there are other ones that are different ages, but that's kind of the age demographic I think it's going for. We're based mostly in North Carolina, and I love that. I lived in North Carolina for a couple of years, and so it's kind of fun to have the locations be something that I can pinpoint. We are looking at a overlap between Arthurian legend and Southern Black Girl magic. I am here for all of that. So good. The author does such a good job of going into like historical things and relevant topics and tying it into this magical world that she has built, and these characters, I'm just so invested, and I couldn't put the book down. I've lost so many hours of sleep reading this, and I do not regret it one bit. You've got lovable supporting characters that get more spotlight in this third book, and I'm so glad because there are some characters that I just absolutely adore. You have a very diverse cast of characters. We've got strong character development. I will say some of the twists were a little more predictable to me this time. I don't know if it's because I was expecting them, or I don't really know. But I just felt like some of the twists were a little less like, whoa, that just really happened type of thing. Because I felt like book two had a lot of whoa moments, and I didn't feel like that as much this time. I'm still engaged, still invested, and I cannot wait for the fourth book. So again, that's Oathbound, the third book in the Legend-Born cycle. Okay, the third book I want to talk about, I'm not quite done yet, but I'm almost done. This was recommended to me by a friend. You know who you are. Thank you so much for the recommendation. She said that this book made her think of me and thought I would really like it, and you are absolutely right. This is X Marks the Spot by Gloria Chao. It was published December 2024. It's a standalone at 384 pages. It's considered young adult romance, contemporary fiction, some mystery, some adventure, and the tropes, or I guess the trope is like rival to lovers. We're on themes of like family secrets, grief, struggles with identity, culture, and there's lots of miscommunication running throughout. I think like my main takeaway is that there are different ways for what it means to be specifically Taiwanese American. I am Taiwanese American, and there's so many different ways that people experience that. And so just for one person to say they are Taiwanese American doesn't mean they fit into like a specific box. And what I love about how this book describes those different ways of being is that these kids or young adults, I mean, they're just graduates of high school. They are exploring what it means for them to be Taiwanese American. And they go on this trip, they go to Taiwan, and it's reminiscent of a program called Love Boat. I don't know if it still exists, but basically these young people go to Taiwan to learn more about themselves. So it kind of is similar to this kind of program that's in the book. So the setting is in the United States and in Taiwan. I feel like the audience for this is specific to Taiwanese Americans because there's so much talk about food and language and the way that there are homophones in everything. Like Taiwanese people love homophones and word play puzzle type of things. And there's just so much of it in the book and it is explained, but I feel like unless that is familiar to you, you don't necessarily get it, like understand it to that next level. And I'm not trying to sound like exclusionary. I just mean this from a perspective of someone who comes from that heritage. And so that is my experience. And I felt instant connection with it. Like the parts that you don't get and the parts that you do get, the parts where you don't belong, the other parts where you feel like you should belong or you look like you belong, but you don't really belong. All of that tied together. And all the talk about the street food, like I get it. All the spots that they went to visit, I've been there. And so that was so fun to read and it definitely brought back memories of all the places we have been. I just love that. I really, really like that. So maybe that is something that you're interested in. Of course, if you're not Taiwanese American, you can obviously go read it too. I'm just saying that I feel like the connection for someone who has lived that is going to read it maybe in a different way. And I really liked it. Now, in general, I do not like rom-coms. I just can't get into them. And this one was cheesy too, and it's cute, and there are parts where it was a little eye-rolling, but it's still super fun. I felt like the cultural connection part is what really got me in this one, and that is what made it. So yes, that is X marks the spot. I'm almost done. I felt like I'm close enough to the end where I can tell you about it without telling you like details, like giving stuff away. I do try to talk about books in a way that talks more about the writing style and how I feel about it versus the summary of the book, because you can look up the summary of the book anywhere online. I don't want to give away any spoilers, and so I try to focus on what the book did for me and my experience reading it and the writing style. So hopefully that comes through. All right, we are on to the food for thought section, which is the last section of this episode. And I do have a little bit of a topic to ask you to bring up. And the word is satisfying. So I want to know what you find super satisfying. Something that just fills your cup or something that just makes you go, wow, like stops in your tracks. Like that is awesome. And it could be so many different things. For me lately, it is bread that turns out so beautiful. I will never get tired of a beautiful loaf of bread. I think I talked about this last time too, but I guess that just emphasizes the fact that I love that. I find it so satisfying. And so that's one. Another one is a really good book. A book that makes me feel all the feels. Like that is so satisfying. I love a book that makes me want to like chuck it at a wall or cry or giggle or, I just want it to invoke some sort of emotion or make me think. Like that is super satisfying. The third satisfying thing I want to bring up is the synchrony of colors. When I find that color combination that makes me go, that is it. That is so satisfying. There's just something that clicks. There's something that's just like, yes, that is it. And I couldn't tell you exactly what rules it's following or anything like that. It's just that, I probably could if I wanted to if I wanted to dissect it down to what it is, but I'm not going to do that. It's just that feeling, the feeling that you're like, that's right. That is what I'm going for. That is really singing to me. And yeah, that's just what I want. So those are three things that have been very satisfying to me lately. If you would like to share some things that are satisfying to you, feel free to drop them in the comments below this video. If you prefer not to comment on YouTube, I will post a, I guess, cover image that's the same as this one on my Instagram, and you can comment there if that's somewhere you are more comfortable sharing. But yeah, I just really have found a few things that I've been so delighted by that are just so satisfying that I thought, I feel like those are really good things to hold on to. Those are things that have just really gotten to me lately in a good way, and I'm gonna hold on to that. I hope you're doing well, taking good care of yourselves, your loved ones, and your neighbors. Cheers to being creative, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.